At Cape Kennedy, 2 months and 4 days after the second unmanned Gemini flight, Command Pilot Virgil Grissom and Pilot John Young were suited for the first manned mission, GT-3. It was 2 hours before launch, March 23, 1965. The astronauts arrive at the pad and walk up the ramp. At 9 minutes past 7 o'clock, they entered the gantry elevator and took the short ride to the White Room for a mission which had 2 major objectives. Gemini would demonstrate 2-man spaceflight, qualifying all systems in manned flight, and test the ability of it to maneuver a spacecraft using the orbital attitude and maneuvering system called OMS. The astronauts enter the Erector White Room surrounding the spacecraft. They disconnect the portable air conditioners and remove their outer shoe coverings. 3 onboard experiments were conducted during the mission of GT-3. The first, planned to study the effects of zero gravity on cell growth of sea urchin eggs, was unsuccessful because of a failure in the experiment's apparatus. Pilot Young conducted 2 experiments. First, he exposed human blood samples to the combined effects of phosphorus-32 radiation and zero gravity. Then, during re-entry, he injected distilled water in pulses into the ionized layer around the spacecraft as a technique for establishing communications during the blackout period. Both experiments proved successful. Final adjustments are made after flight crew ingress. Technicians close the cabin hatches and begin securing them. The astronauts are integrated into the countdown at this point. The count continued with precision. There were no important holds.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ultra liftoff. Master clock has started.
Gemini 3 lifted cleanly from the pad at 9:24 Eastern Standard Time and rose vertically above Cape Kennedy. The launch vehicle accelerated smoothly through the programmed flight phase.
There's the roll program. Roger, roll. Plus 10 seconds. Okay, your roll's completed. Roger, roll, complete. There goes the pitch. Roger, pitch. You're on your way, Molly Brown. Yeah, man. We're a little bit high on the flight path, but no problem, Molly Brown. Okay, Molly Brown, go for staging. Roger, looks good from here. Roger. Update received. Roger, update. Okay, there is staging. Roger, staged. And we're pressing. Okay, thrust looks good from here. The riser's covering you. Roger. RGS is go. Looks good from here. Oh, man, wait a minute. Steering is good from here.
Vapor trails mark the path of Gemini 3 as it passes through maximum Q.
Pretty big throttle you got there, huh? Steering right down the old line. Okay. Roger, Molly Brown, your go from here. Let's go. Roger. Roger, stand by for my mark on point 8. Mark point 8. Let's go.
The first stage engine separated, and the second stage engine propelled the spacecraft toward orbit. At T plus 5 minutes and 34 seconds, second stage engine cutoff occurred, and the mission director confirmed orbital insertion.
Roger, you are go, Molly Brown.
GT3 entered orbit at some 17,500 miles per hour, establishing an apogee of 139 statute miles and a perigee of 100 statute miles. As the tracking network followed the first orbit over the southwest United States, the command pilot performed the Texas burn. He fired 2 thrusters of the orbital attitude and maneuver system for 1 minute and 49 seconds. This created a new orbit with a perigee of 98 4/10 statute miles and an apogee of 104 statute miles. Over the Indian Ocean and in the second orbit, successful translation maneuvers resulted in a change of orbital plane. Of particular interest are the still photographs Pilot Young took from the spacecraft during the mission. This series of exposures was made during the second orbit at an altitude of 90 miles over Mexico. We can see the nose of the spacecraft in the lower left frame. The top of the screen is north. The United States-Mexican border is dead center. The Sonora Desert is outlined by the Colorado River, which extends as a white line forward of the nose of the spacecraft. Cloud cover obscures the Imperial Valley area of the United States in the upper left screen, but the Pinacate volcanic fields of Mexico can be distinguished to the right of the spacecraft. East of Hawaii, on the third and final orbit, Ohm's thrusters again reduced velocity. This maneuver would have established a new orbital perigee of 51 7/10 statute miles had the flight continued beyond 3 orbits. Department of Defense forces were alerted and ready as the command pilot came up on his pre-retrofire checklist. Then at T plus 4 hours and 33 minutes, the retro rockets were fired for a normal re-entry. The command pilot flew the spacecraft in during re-entry. Helicopters and recovery aircraft took off from their stations and began the preliminary search of the prime recovery area. Spacecraft 3 splashed down approximately 59 miles from the planned landing point. Navy swimmers jumped into the sea and attached a flotation collar for additional stability against the fairly heavy swells of the Atlantic. Search aircraft located the position by homing in on the spacecraft's recovery beacons. A trailing stream of green dye in the ocean aids in sighting the spacecraft from the air. After 40 minutes, the astronauts were picked up by helicopter and flown to the aircraft carrier, the USS Intrepid. As the carrier proceeded ahead to recover the spacecraft, congratulations were in order for the astronauts. The command pilot, Virgil Grissom, had executed 2 spacecraft orbital changes for the first time in manned flight. He had, in effect, reduced the altitude of his orbit a total of 87 statute miles by 2 Ohm's burns. Using the same thrusters, he also performed precise orbital plane changes, essential for rendezvous and docking with a target vehicle. The captain of the Intrepid and his officers added their congratulations for the achievement, and the astronauts proceeded to their medical examination. Spacecraft 3 was soon recovered from the ocean by the Intrepid. Hoisted by crane on deck, it had survived re-entry with no visible damage. The heat shield and afterbodies withstood the maximum temperature of re-entry with minor charring of the surface. The flag and lettering United States painted on the spacecraft still retained bright markings. The optimism gained during real-time flight was confirmed by analysis of the recorded data. No problems of any significance emerged. The objectives of GT3 were fully realized. The Gemini program team continued working toward an early flight of GT4 and the long-duration mission of 4 days. Now definitely on manned flight status, Project Gemini moves forward.